Hello, Bainbridge. I am Stefan Goldby, the President and CEO of the Bainbridge Chamber. Ahead of the upcoming elections, welcome to this community conversation with one of the candidates for City Council. In the interests of fairness, we are asking all candidates the same 12 questions that knowledgeable Chamber members have helped us write. And though the candidates' individualized answers may lead to individualized follow-ups or requests for clarification. Each candidate has up to 45 minutes to answer all 12 questions. None of the candidates have seen the questions in advance, and their answers will be presented in full. Do you understand and agree to these conditions, Chris Smith?
I do.
Fantastic. All right, with all that in mind, hello, Mr. Smith, candidate for District 2 in the North Ward. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
So to kick off, let's talk a little bit about community engagement. Can you let us know which island organizations you've previously worked for, with, or volunteered at?
Well, I have a somewhat of a limitation on that because I've spent most of my time living on the island, working in Seattle. And that has actually precluded me from actually joining a lot of island-specific community actions. I am a member, for example, that doesn't mean I don't have a listing of civic actions, but just not specific to Bainbridge Island. I'm a member of the Civil Air Patrol. I do a lot of work with outreach in aviation for kids, getting them involved in aviation. I've done some work with the Museum of Flight in that regard. And I've also worked with several community services in Seattle for food banking, etc. So unfortunately, I will tell you straight out that I don't have a long list of participation in various island-specific activities. So
you have now been actively campaigning, talking to islanders for a while now. So what are the top 3 concerns that you're hearing from the community?
Well, I've heard pros and cons regarding affordable housing. And I'm an affordable housing guy. And if we've kept up with the news, there was on the 28th, there was a council meeting that I listened in on where they approved some ARPA funds for affordable housing. And our friend Phaedra over there at Housing Resources Bainbridge is delighted to hear that. However, as I go through on my Chris Smith listening tour, I find that that has been top of mind for a lot of people. So I'm not unique necessarily in that regard. And I'm glad to hear that. I'm kind of ahead of a parade on that one, and I'm just delighted. I think affordable housing or housing, let's use the term housing that supports all segments of our population, lend to the vibrance of our community. And that's why I've been 100% behind it. Some people are concerned that we don't want Bainbridge to look like Mercer Island. And we don't now, and I'm okay with trying to keep it that way.
So sort of leading on from that, the recent draft of the county-wide land use report has suggested that while our island's growth is on track to hit our own stated projected levels for 2036, the growth itself has not been happening in line with our own comp plan. Do you agree? And how do you think the island's residential, commercial, and community needs can best be balanced with the preservation of our natural resources?
Excellent question. I think that one of the things that we have to do in the primary goal here is to meet the requirements of the Growth Management Act, as at the same time support the sustainability, the environmental sustainability on Bainbridge Island. And the sustainability, I think, to me, is the key issue. The reason I say that is because the growth here on Bainbridge is going to happen. in recent developments such as the pandemic, with everybody now working from home or online, has untethered a lot of us from our workplace. So Bainbridge Island now becomes a much more attractive place to work, regardless of where your economic income actually comes from. Case in point, a relative of mine just moved his young family to Bainbridge. They moved in about 3 months ago. She works in Tacoma. He works in Kirkland. And they are online. And visiting them a few days ago, we walked from their house into Bainbridge, had some ice cream at Mora, and walked back. And through the parks and the trail system. What a wonderful vision of life that we want to preserve on Bainbridge Island that experience presented to me. So that, from meeting the requirements of the Growth Management Act, we have to maintain the sustainability. And I think we're ahead of the plan from the terms of the Growth Management Act. We're actually about 6 months or so ahead of where the act requires us to be. And I think that the growth is inevitable. We just need to get out ahead of it with infrastructure so that it doesn't become a problem.
What do you think, turning to Winslow itself, what do you think requires the most urgent update in the current Winslow master plan?
Transportation. We need to organize Winslow itself so that the walking community, the bicycling community, the multimodal community can have unfettered access, not unfettered, but better access to all the different aspects of life, quality of life that Winslow provides. Right now, Winslow is very concentrated because it's mostly the people coming off the ferry that are going to the businesses there on Winslow Way. And I think that if we can increase the access to Winslow from various parts of the island, we'll be able to expand that Winslow core to meet more needs. The other thing in downtown Winslow is that I would be focused on is to make sure that the businesses on Winslow have some support during the pandemic. And I'm concerned that some of the businesses that I like, for example, are really struggling. And I'd like to see some form of support to those guys. And I'm not 100% sure how to do it, but I would like to see that our businesses on Winslow sustain themselves through the pandemic.
For those businesses and for almost our entire community, COVID's prompted unprecedented shifts. You already made a reference to that. So, when thinking about the operations of businesses and nonprofits and the city itself on Bainbridge, what parts of the recent pivot do you think will turn out to be permanent changes, and how best can the city support them?
Ask the back part of the question. What part of the what?
What of the pivot of the way that people have had to change the way they do things? What part of that will be permanent, and how can the city best support them?
I'm not 100% sure that a great deal of it will be permanent in terms of the businesses on Winslow, because they're primarily retail. Now, excuse me. One of the things that I do foster, and I'm deeply committed to, is broadband communication on Bainbridge. And broadband communication supports commerce, it supports emergency services, it supports fire. I'd like to see fiber come into the schools so that kids can start taking virtual field trips and those sorts of things. So if I get my wish, and I plan to work tirelessly towards that, there'll be a lot more online commerce, which could impact Winslow businesses unless they support an online aspect to their retail business. A church mouse is a perfect example. I'd love to be able to, right now, if my wife is a quilter, and so she's a customer of Church Mouse. But right now, if we want to order something from Church Mouse, we order it online and then go down and pick it up. That's fine and that's wonderful. My thought process is that we don't really get to browse, and some of the exploration that we get to do on Winslow is just going in and looking to see what's there, what's available in the bookstore, for example. And I just enjoyed being able to do that. So I think that aspect of the Winslow core in terms of retail will stay, regardless of what we do with the online shopping, the online commerce. So from a downtown Winslow standpoint, I'm just hoping that we get to the point where people feel comfortable enough to go into these shops and go into these stores and be able to deliver business the way it used to be.
One of the other biggest challenges for business on the island right now is finding new employees.
Yes.
One of the biggest struggles those potential hires point to is a lack of affordable workforce housing on the island. What practical steps are you prepared to take to address the island's need for workforce and any other kinds of affordable housing?
I like the term that you used, practical steps. And that's, but the affordable housing is the response to that. We're also improving the transportation in terms of bus services with Pingo and Kitsap Transit. So until we have a good inventory of affordable housing on island, these are employees there in the downtown core and anywhere on the island are going to have to be on the roads and commuting. I'm hoping that we can see an end to that. And the commute task is pretty significant for someone who is a minimum age worker at one of the retail shops there, the bookstore or something like that, who has to live in Poulsbo or God forbid in Seattle and ride the ferry to come to. So from a practical standpoint, I think that the affordable housing on Bainbridge is really the only shot that we have to allow our support personnel and us to be able to have access to employment on Bainbridge.
How best do you think equity and diversity can be increased on Bainbridge?
A wonderful question. I think that the equity primarily boils down to economic equity. And yes, we have some racial considerations on Bainbridge that I think they need to be addressed. I think the largest population, non-white population on Bainbridge is blends between Hispanic and Asian and island peoples. So I think that we need to build a welcoming community among all the various interests on Bainbridge in order to welcome these people. I haven't observed, and perhaps that's the ratio scale of, having spent a great deal of time of my daily life in Seattle, where we've done a great deal to support making racial equity a commonplace and visible. The government, the US government has a toolkit that the Racial Equity Board could be using to sort of more or less billboard racial equity concerns and solutions. I have not seen, as a member of the population, a lot of results coming out of those efforts, and I hope that will take hold. But our racial equity board is probably the tip of the spear in terms of making that happen.
You mentioned broadband, so I assume that'll be a part of this answer, but what kinds of infrastructure improvement do you think are most needed on Bainbridge?
We have fiber, and it's fiber backbone right now. And fiber backbone is useful. The conundrum with fiber is, quote unquote, the last mile. How do we get fiber to the actual user rather than off the backbone and to the user? Fiber itself is the most useful for institutional users on Bainbridge, like the schools, like fire, like emergency, like City Hall, and like intelligent infrastructures like turning on streetlights at night, etc. To support the individual on Bainbridge, 5G communications is, I think, going to be the lead in terms of providing high-speed communication to the individual. I just bought this phone, my first phone that actually has 5G communications in it, and it is ridiculously fast. And through organizations like one that I've heard of, Mesh Communications, we can go to existing cell towers, put a 6-foot tall pole on or top of the tower or around it somewhere, and deliver a 5G communications network to the island. So the balance is, as I see it, is that 5G communication, island-wide 5G communication to complement our cell coverage would take care of the individual user and the individual household. And we would use fiber to get to the institutional users. How cool would it be to have our kids take virtual field trips to the Opera House in Vienna? That's what 5G can do for our education systems. So that's kind of where I see broadband really supporting island life here on Bainbridge.
And beyond the internet connection, is there anything else in the way of infrastructure you think needs work?
Well, the 5G is beyond the internet. That's also cellular, et cetera. And 5G, can be employed in a variety of different ways because it's so granular. The list of ways that we could use 5G is probably pretty long. We could have, emergency workers on the way to a call with 5G in their pocket to listen to the latest status. We could have EMT with 5G in the ambulance on the way to the ferry, delivering medical data to the eventual recipient of the patient. So 5G, again, if it's as granular as I expect it to be, and I carry it in my pocket, the list for 5G is very, very long. And the only thing that's in the way of us deploying that intelligently is our own creativity.
What do you think, even though there was a slight upwards blip recently, which is great, but what do you think the falling enrollment at Bainbridge's highly rated and well-funded public school district is most indicative of?
I think that you've come into an area of major concern for me. And that is, hopefully affordable housing will help to fix this. But if we continue at current course and speed, young people will not be able to live on Bainbridge Island. And the drop in enrollment is a harbinger of that. And it just happened, I think, for the first time this year for the kindergarten and first grade. So the time is coming to where we have to make Bainbridge Island more amenable to all elements of our population. Yes, it will impact the schools significantly, and it'll impact the funding for the schools significantly. And I'm very proud of the quality of our schools on Bainbridge. They were able to get my daughter through, and she is now a wildlife biologist in Kashmir studying sage grouse. and after college. And so if the Bainbridge schools can do that for my lovely daughter, they deserve all that we can deliver for that. So in answer to your question, short answer is that we need to make Bainbridge Island attractive to the younger populations. I don't want to see Bainbridge become the largest old folks home in the world. It's that straightforward.
I think that one's in Florida, but yes, absolutely.
Fair point. Okay. In the Pacific Northwest.
Yes. Should Bainbridge take a leadership position in reducing waste, educating consumers, and promoting reusable items in our community's everyday life? And if so, what would your key initiatives in this area be?
Well, a lot of key initiatives have already been taken, and eliminating single-use anything, plastics, wood, cups, or anything like that is the way to do that. We also need to invest in the disposition of waste, the biodegradable waste, and how we manage waste that we collect on Bainbridge Island. The concerns that I have is that I'm hoping enough ARPA funds have been devoted towards upgrading sewage, the sewage plant, and our biodegradable to waste facilities. But beyond that, we need to get rid of single-use items. And again, back to Mora. When you go to Mora and have ice cream, do get it with a cone, not a cup and a spoon. That's what I mean by a microcosm of what single waste might be. So, but single waste, we always take our own bags to TNC and to Safeway. We always take our, we're always trying to reuse as much as we can in our own house. And I think leveling up the consciousness about how important that is really the only step that we can take as a population, and then depend on individual behavior to support that. My belief is that at least on Bainbridge, because most of us move here because we love it here, we would be a lot more inclined to follow through on environmental support with little things that we can do, just like bringing our own bags to the grocery store.
You're only going to have limited time and resources to tackle all the challenges of Bainbridge life. So could you think and name 1 to 3 specific actions that ideally you would like to define the legacy of your potential term of office?
5G and an expanding fiber, transportation, multimodal transportation, which means that from 8 to 80, we can ride, bicycles to schools. We can walk to schools instead of ride school buses. I did that when I was a kid, walked through the woods, and the greenhouse gas emissions. I want to be part of that with green building, and with and preserving the environment and greenhouse gases through the use of environmentally sensitive materials. When I moved to Bainbridge, I bought a house that had a wood foundation. Okay, it was a solar home on Blackster Lane. This is 25 years ago. And so I know that it can be done. Concrete is something that really takes a lot of energy to make, and we don't have to do things that way. We can build homes with 25 rusted out cars rather than 36-inch diameter trees. We can do that. All we have to do is take the initiative. So to answer your question, I'm a greenhouse gases emissions guy, broadband, as you've heard, and transportation that supports all aspects of the island. If there's a Burt Gilman trail that's put in on Bainbridge Island, that's the Chris Smith, Stephen Goldsby trail, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so then finally, what kind of working atmosphere will you strive to create if elected to City Council?
Well, a lot of that depends on whether you're working inside or outside. But what I want to have from a working atmosphere is you're touching now back onto the inclusiveness of Bainbridge Island as a society, and allowing everybody, regardless of what their work is, to the person who is the janitor at the school, to the person who's the principal at the school, to the person who runs an investment house here on Bainbridge Island, that we all respect one another and respect individuals for who they are. And I believe that we sometimes like to get a little bit proud of ourselves because we're Bainbridge Islanders, and I'm not okay with that. I spent a good number of decades working for IBM. And the number one, in management positions at IBM, the number one mantra for managers at IBM was respect for the individual. You're talking to the lowest form of economic activity on Bainbridge, a person who's maybe sweeping the streets. He should be treated with the exact same respect, okay, that we would treat anybody on Bainbridge Island. And I think that from an individual behavioral standpoint, if we just respect each other for who we are, we'll go a long way towards fixing ethnicity problems, racial problems, and the like.